What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. On today's episode, we're going to be tackling the 1JZ cooling system, and we're going to be making modifications to the block to eliminate the unnecessary cooling components. As I mentioned in the previous episode, the JZ has a couple components that are being cooled by the engine cooling system, which then rises the temperature of the cooling of the engine. And it's kind of critical when it comes to JZs because JZs like to run hot. And if you put it into a 240SX, for example, you run into overheating problems. So today, we're actually going to eliminate some of these components that put extra heat into the cooling system. One of the components we're going to be tackling today is the throttle body. The throttle body has cooling going through it, which serves for emission purposes. Because this is a race engine, we are not going to need it, so we're going to block those lines off. Also, we're going to eliminate the oil cooler right here. That heats up the coolant quite a bit because the engine oil gets hot on its own in its own system. It is necessary to cool the oil, but because we're going to be running a external cooler for this, we're going to put a sandwich plate and we're going to eliminate these lines. Also, while we're at it, we are going to remove this coolant pipe, thread an A&N fitting into this head, and then that's going to be designed to run the line out of the engine into the radiator on its own. This is one of the lines that was used for a heater core, along with this one that goes inside the car. We're not going to need that anymore. We're going to have to remove the turbo and get this pipe out. That way I can cut the pipe later on, weld it up and block it off, so we have no more coolant traveling behind the engine into the side underneath the manifold. So that's what we're going to start working on today. I'm going to end up pulling the intake manifold for that, and then I'm going to pull the turbo off, and then I'll explain a little bit more once those components are off. Alright, so I pulled off the intake manifold and the turbo, and now I can explain a little better what we're doing and why we're doing it. So underneath the intake manifold, you have this pipe that runs all the way from the other side, and that's considered the cold side because there's cold coolant coming from the radiator into the thermostat and the water pump. So you get the cold water that comes around the block here, and then it shoots into the engine oil cooler. You want as cold as coolant to come in there so it could heat soak as much heat as it can, and then the hot water right here shoots back into the engine. Also, out of that line you have a smaller hose that comes into your throttle body. It heat soaks the throttle body. It comes through this hose into the cylinder head. So idealistically, we don't want anything heat soaking the cooling system and then dropping back into the engine, which is already running hot as is. That is why we've removed the intake manifold, and we are going to eliminate those hoses for that reason. Also, since that hose is running around the block and it runs underneath the turbo manifold, it is very hard to get to. Now, you can possibly get to it without actually removing the turbo. You can probably use a ratchet wrench and squeeze your way in here to get this 12mm nut right here and then right here, and that's fine. But we are replacing the turbo, and we are replacing this motor mount because this motor mount only works for the car it came out of. So I had no choice but to take the turbo off. I got the turbo off right here. I got the J-pipe off right here. And then I got the intake manifold off here. And the heat shields here as well. So with all that removed, I can safely remove this pipe. And what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to cut the pipe right here. And I'm going to seam weld it. There's no more coolant that's going to be coming out of here. This is going to be redundant. We're no longer going to be using it since we're not running heater core in this engine. Alright, you guys, I've removed everything I've had to get this engine ready, and now I'm ready to perform and explain a little bit farther how I am going to plug up the unnecessary cooling hoses and outlets on the block. So one of the fittings that we're going to be converting into a Dash 8 A&N fitting is this guy right here coming out of the head. All I had to do is tap this around left and right and it came right out. As you guys can see, this is a press fit going into the head. One of the main reasons we're actually removing that is because this likes to get fatigued over time and it could potentially pop out. Let's say you're going to run this engine really hot. The hotter you run it, the cooling pressure goes up. That could potentially pop out on the track. You're going to lose all the coolant and your day's going to be over. Now that I have removed that, we are going to tap this into a NTP 3/8. This is the fitting I'm going to be using right here. It's going to be a Dash 8 3/8 NTP flare adapter. I will link this in the description so you guys know which part I am using. The reason why we're using NTP stands for National Pipe Thread. The thread that goes in is actually tapered, so the more you thread it in, the tighter it gets. It eliminates any potential leaks and this fitting coming loose from the pressure behind it. That's why we're going to use NTP for that. This fitting right here was the one that was connected to the oil cooler. This is where the hot coolant was going back into the block. This was fairly easy to remove. It's a 19 millimeter. As soon as you remove that, you can see it already has threads. This is very similar to NTP. It's not the same. So all I'm gonna have to do is chase this, make sure that the fitting that I'm gonna be installing is gonna thread very easily. For that, we are going to be using another 3/8 pipe plug. It is NTP, just as I've mentioned on the other one. It's tapered, so the more you screw it in, the tighter it gets. And the third one we're going to be doing is this fitting right here. That was for the throttle body, hot coolant return. This one was a little tricky to remove. It is another press fitting. It was in there quite tight, so what I had to do is I had to chisel away on the corner till I broke it loose and I got it to spin a little freely. Then I put some vice grips on this and I started just moving it out. Once I removed it, you can see there's nothing really holding it other than the press fit. So same just as this fitting, it could potentially fail at the track from the high coolant pressures and pop out and ruin your day. Now, if you don't want to get into it and do all the work that I did here, you could potentially just weld this shut and call it a day, or you can even weld this shut with aluminum. However, I wouldn't suggest it because you're going to be putting a lot of heat close to the head gasket and that could get very tricky. So for that, we are once again going to be using a 3/8 pipe plug, just like the one here. I have two of them right here. I will put the link in the description for those as well so you guys know what I'm using. And this one is going to be a little trickier, just like the other one there. We are going to have to thread this completely and plug it up. Hopefully that gives you guys a little better explanation and understanding now that I've showed you what we're going to be doing. It is time consuming, but I do believe it's necessary. You always want to get rid of any potential failures on the engine and the car before you take it to the track, because it is expensive to race these cars, and the last thing you want is a short day because of something simple as a cooling line that you didn't plug up correctly. Alright you guys, I've tapped all the holes, I've put the fittings in. I also use sealant tape. You can buy that at any hardware store. That's just an extra safety protection. I put it on the threads to make sure there's absolutely no leaks coming out of the threads. So this fitting right here, along with this fitting right here, or should I say the plug, that was very easy to tap because this is aluminum. I used the vacuum to kind of suck out all the shavings. This one got a little bit more complicated because it is an iron block, it is metal. I didn't go too deep in with the fitting and the threading of the tap because I was a little scared that the tap might actually break inside this iron block and then I'd have a whole nother set of problems. Alright you guys, that's how you simplify a 1JZ cooling system. Hopefully this information serves you well and you can use it on your race car. Make sure you stay tuned for the upcoming episodes where we tackle the cylinder head and the oil system and the timing belt. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, notification button, and hit the like button if you like this video. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.